First Samuel chapter 28. Chapter 28. And we are talking about it matters who you inquire from. Throughout the discussion on this character study of David and looking at his leadership preparation, he was being prepared to become the king of Israel. The one thing we have emphasized is the way David did not just make decisions. He was proactive and inquired of the Lord continuously. Even on very simple matters, he would always inquire of the Lord. And you have learned that if you want to be a good leader, always think before you jump. I think the Englishman says, think before you leap. If you leap and then think later, you may be already dead. So David has taught us that a good leader, if, for example, somebody comes and gives you a story about somebody who is about to overthrow you, you don't act immediately. You give yourself time to think, you proactively study the issue, look at what and make a decision. But most important, David has taught us, beyond just thinking, talk to God, inquire of God as a Christian leader, so that God can lead you. Many people have burned their fingers because they were told a story, they acted with the story, and it turned out they were being played on. And you can do a lot of destruction. Many dictators destroy many innocent people because of not inquiring, not researching, not thinking before acting. So I hope for us who have been studying David, this will come out very clearly. However, today we see somebody who inquired but did not inquire from God. It actually matters who you inquire from. We know a similar story when King Solomon died. His son took over, Rehoboam, and he's a young leader, new to issues. So people come with a question, and he finds it a difficult question. So as a wise leader does, Rehoboam does the same. He goes inquiring from the old people. And the old people give him very, very good advice. However, as a young man, hot-blooded, he thinks, no. I should find out from my age mates what they think. And the advice he gets from his age mates literally destroys the kingdom. In fact, God would have removed the whole kingdom, but he took away 10 tribes, and Rehoboam was left with 2, just because of inquiring from the wrong people. People who don't know, and yet you have information from people who know. Can you see clearly that if you are a leader, who you put near you, what we call the kitchen cabinet, will determine whether your leadership is destroyed or not, whether you actually help the community to reach the goals they had set or not, will depend on who are your advisors, who has your ear, so to put it. And if you have not taken it seriously, there will be trouble with it. Now, let's just see we are still in 1 Samuel chapter 28. Let's see how it begins. Verse 1. In those days, the Philistines gathered their forces to fight against Israel. Achish said to David, "You must understand that you and your men will accompany me in the army." David said, "Then you will see for yourself what your servant can do." You know, David had gone to hide with the enemy of his enemy. That is the enemy of Saul. The trouble with it is that I don't know whether he had thought of the worst case scenario, because the worst case scenario finally came. There is fighting between Saul and the Philistines. Who is he going to side with? And actually he is finally confronted by his new friend, the enemy of Saul. And he said, you must understand that you and your men will accompany me in the army. Can you imagine? He's going to be killing his relatives and killing the people of Israel, whom he intends to lead. He is in what we call a tight spot between a rock and a hard place. It's a worst case scenario. Hiding with Saul's enemies, you certainly should have thought you are risking being asked to fight on the other side against Saul. So, if we are asked such a question and you have never thought about it, you are likely to make a wrong decision because you are not given time to think. And that's why it is important, like you have been emphasizing throughout this series, the importance of being proactive. And one thing is, and you have been talking about it, to always think of the worst case scenario. Because the worst case scenario, you are supposed to fight it happening, but sometimes it still happens. Always analyze the worst case scenario on any matter. Then ask yourself, how can I prevent it? Then ask yourself, what if it actually happens? How will I handle it to reduce negative impact? And so from this story, it is important to understand, even if you are inquiring of the Lord, there's sometimes the advice he gives you puts you in yet another risk. Sorts out one risk, puts another risk. You still need to consult him on how to deal with it. And you need to consult not when the crisis comes, but well before the crisis, so that you ask him, if they ever ask me to do this, how should I reply? How should I deal with the matter? Because that will be something quite useful if you have thought about it in advance. Goes on to say, Achish replied, very well, I'll make you my bodyguard for life. Wow. So, David had actually succeeded in convincing his newfound leader that he could be trusted. The bodyguard is the person you trust most. And David had convinced these, in enemy territory, had convinced them that he is one who he could trust. The king could trust him more than his own people. Now, it is worse when you become your enemy's best friend. Because you see, now that he is the best friend, he puts you into even bigger trouble by making you the bodyguard. And of course, in war, one of the people they really are after is the king. They want to kill the king if they can afford. Then he makes David and his men the bodyguard. You can see the tight spot he is in. But every tight spot is tighter if you never imagined it could ever happen, and therefore never inquired of God on how you could handle it if it ever happens. After praying, God, don't let this happen, but if it happens, how would I deal with it? Verse 3 says, now Samuel was dead, and all Israel had mourned for him and buried him in his own town of Ramah. Saul had expelled the medium and spiritist from the land. The Philistines assembled and came and set up camp. Remember, Philistine territories where David is. They set up camp at Gilboa. When Saul saw the Philistines' army, he was afraid. Terror filled his heart. He inquired of the Lord, but the Lord did not answer him by dreams of Urim or prophets. Saul then said to his attendants, find me a woman who is a medium, so I may go and inquire of her. There is one in Edom, they said. You know, Saul is the one who had, most likely on the advice of King of Samuel, the prophet, the priest and prophet, had decided to remind people, we can only rely on God, we can only consult God, we cannot consult any other. And he said, If anybody has ever heard offering the services of a medium is a person who says he can connect with the spirits of the dead and tell you what they are saying. If you ever discovered, you'll be killed. Can you imagine? The fear that the king is in has caused him to backslide to what he had rejected before. So he's the same one now looking for the people he had banned. And is wondering, might some have remained? You really need to be afraid of fear. If that sounds funny. Afraid of fear. You need to be aware that the moment you act out of fear, you can end up in wrong directions. That's why when you get into a crisis, always think of the worst case scenario and realize that even the worst case scenario, God can be with you. And the moment you realize that whatever problem, as big as it is, it can even be bigger and God will still handle it. It will allow your spirit to cool down and think correctly. That's not what happened to the King Saul. He was so afraid. And because God doesn't seem to be answering quickly, he wants to inquire from a medium. Do you get that kind of level? Where you get so desperate, you start making wrong decisions. You are dropped by your boyfriend, and you feel you are over 30. You think you are getting old, and yet that is very young. But you think you are getting old. So any boy in a trouser, now you say, yes, God, but I was so good to the other guy and he dropped me. You can see clearly he's not serious with God, but you take him. Later, when you are married and he has made you a drum to be beating every night, you remember where it all began. It was fear that things had gotten so bad. It is both fear and lack of patience. Because you see, Saul actually first consulted God, and when God did not answer quickly, he felt he can go elsewhere because of the fear he had. A leader must gain courage. Courage is not lack of danger. Courage is trusting God even in the midst of danger. And that's a very, very important truth if you are going to be a leader. When everybody around you is melting, you have a trust in God that makes you believe He will still help you out of the situation. Anyway, for our friend King Saul, he didn't act like that. Look at verse 8. So Saul disguised himself, putting on other clothes, and at night he and two men went to the woman. Consult a spirit for me, he said, and bring up for me the one I name. So he has succumbed. Now that God is not acting quickly, and I'm so afraid of these Philistines army, what do I do? What is the best thing? Let the medium tell me. The Bible does not allow spirits of the dead to operate among the living. That's one thing we know. Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 10, 11, and 12. Therefore, it is believed by theologians that what Saul wanted to be called will not be the real Samuel. It's a demonic representation of Samuel, since they are not allowed to talk to the living. We also see that in the New Testament about the story of the rich man and Lazarus. And the rich man, now in torment, would like Lazarus to be sent. They said that can't happen. They have the Bible. They have Moses and the prophet. That was the Bible then. The dead people cannot come to help the living. So when you think you are dreaming at night and you can see your late mother, that's a ghost or a demon you are dealing with. You are not actually talking to your mother. Or you think your grandfather who died 20 years ago is visiting you every night. That's the wrong direction for a leader to go, where they are dealing with all kinds of forbidden things. Some go the stars. Every time they open the newspaper, they want to read the stars. You are born in December. This is your star. This is what it is saying for you today. No. The story today is teaching us, through the life of David, that it was better to go David's direction of seeking God and trusting in God and waiting on God than to start going to the stars and all kinds of people. Some, of course, even currently in Kenya, are going to ancestral worship. What did the ancestors say? No. Going to the dead is forbidden by the scriptures. The Bible does not allow you to consult the spirits of the dead. Verse 9 says, "But the woman said to him, 'Surely you know what Saul has done. He has cut off the mediums and spiritists from the land. Why have you set a trap for my life to bring about my death?' Saul said to her, 'By the Lord, as surely as the Lord lives, you will not be punished for this.'" The thief and the facilitator of the thief are equally guilty. Here is a medium who is doing the wrong thing, and Saul, who is not doing the wrong thing. Both of them are equally wrong. Do not blame just the thief. Blame the person they sold the item to. Blame the person who also facilitated it. And in this case, Saul has just put himself into trouble by participating with this spiritist on a matter God has actually forgiven. I repeat, the thief and the one who facilitates the theft are equally guilty. In Manabarankia we say, you cannot be available to stop a felony, and then you say, "But I was not the one." But you saw it happening, and you could have stopped it. Saul knew very well what he was doing was wrong. No wonder, as king, he had commanded for all of them to be killed. But now he was the one participating. Verse 11, in the story we are looking at. Then the woman asked, "Whom shall I bring up for you?" "Bring up Samuel," he said. When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out at the top of her voice and said to Saul, "Why have you deceived me? You are Saul." The king said to her, "Don't be afraid. What do you see?" The woman said, "I see a ghostly figure coming up out of the earth." "What does it look like?" he asked. "An old man wearing a robe is coming up." Then Saul knew it was Samuel, and he bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. You get it? Here is ancestral worship. And it's actually demonic. The spirits of the dead, what you call the spirits of the dead, is actually demonic. And if you go that route, you're asking for God's curse, just like happened to Saul. And finally, death. So do not start assuming that although you can ask the question, how come she now, from the experience, now knows that Saul is the one who has visited. Certainly the demonic one knows that. That's why we are not suggesting that anything the demonic word says is a lie. But God says that are not God's own. Rely on me, not on witch doctors or diviners or spiritists. And not everything they say is untrue. Some of the things they say are true, but you are not allowed to go that route. Inquire of the Lord. Verse 15 says, Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? I'm in great distress." Saul said, "The Philistines are fighting against me, and God has departed from me. He no longer answers me either by prophets or by dreams. So I've called on you to tell me what to do." Samuel said, "Why do you consult me, now that the Lord has departed from you and become your enemy? The Lord has done what he predicted through me. The Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hands and given it to one of your neighbors, to David, because you did not obey the Lord or carry out his fierce wrath against the Amalekites. The Lord has done this to you today. The Lord will deliver both Israel and you into the hands of the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. The Lord will also give the army of Israel into the hands of the Philistines." This is similar to the spirit of divination. And again, I repeat, it has some truth. But the one facilitating it is the devil, is Satan. And that's what really is confusing, because I grew up believing that all good things come from God. That's what I believed. Then I used to work in Western Kenya, and one day there was a church near where I was staying. There was a church, although I was not attending it. Then I heard that a lot of miracles are taking place in that church. So then, when I was still in Kisumu, I was asked to help organize a crusade for Bonnke. Reinhard Bonnke was coming to Western Kenya, and I was asked to be helping organize it. So I assumed automatically, Bonnke is praying for the sick, miracles are happening. This church that experiences miracles will be one of the churches that attend. Then I learned that the leader of the church had issued a declaration. Nobody was allowed to go to the meetings of Bonnke. I said, wow, that's interesting. So I had to investigate a little more. That's when I learned that these people that experience miracles were not getting miracles through God. In fact, you would come, maybe you have no baby, he prays for you, you actually get pregnant and get a baby. Then you are told, the day you leave my church, your child will die. Some others will come with septic wounds that they could not heal. You come, he prays for you, the wound disappears. Then you are told, if you ever leave this church, that would come back. You know the difference when God is the one who does it? He will do good to you, but does not make you a prisoner without your choice. So I knew it was demonic, and I had to review my thinking. I thought all good things only come from God, and I now realize even the devil can give good things. The only difference is that, like it says in Proverbs chapter 10, verse 22, the blessing of the Lord maketh rich, and adds no sorrow with it. In other words, you can get a blessing not from the Lord. The only difference is that it will be followed by pain and ruin. That's really what is happening here. Here is the devil actually coming through for Saul and giving him ideas. But he is going to end up in a lot of trouble. Look at verse 20. Immediately Saul fell full length on the ground, filled with fear because of Samuel's words. His strength had gone, for he had eaten nothing all day and all that night. Desire to know what God has chosen. If you have a desire to know what God has chosen that you don't know, you end up traumatizing yourself. There are many things we want to know, but sometimes God chooses not to tell us. Please don't go the way of the diviners and the so-called men of God who are visiting witch doctors and others. It is dangerous for you, and it will end up you dead. Verse 21 says, when the woman came to Saul and saw that he was greatly shaken, she said, look, your servant has obeyed you. I took my life in my hands and did what you told me to do. And now please listen to your servant and let me give you some food so you may eat and have the strength to go on your way. He refused and said, I will not eat. But his men joined the woman in urging him, and he listened to them. He got up from the ground and sat on the couch. The woman had a fattened calf at the house, which she butchered At once she took some flour, kneaded it, and baked the bread without yeast. Then she set it before Saul and said to men, and they ate. That same night they got up and left. A good comparison is this one. We are comparing David inquiring of God and Saul inquiring of the Spirit. One ends up with somebody becoming the king. The other one ends up with somebody becoming